다음은 주요 선진 4개 국가에 믿고 마실 수 있는 수돗물 공급을 위한 수질 관리와 음용물 관련 정책에 대한 사례 발표가 있겠습니다. 오늘 4개 국가의 사례 발표를 통해 세계 주요 선진국에서 추진되고 있는 다양한 사례와 아이디어가 우리나라의 수돗물 관련 정책에 활용되어 국민들께서 좀 더 좋은 수돗물 서비스를 받을 수 있는 계기가 되기를 희망합니다. 첫 번째 발표는 미국의 수돗물 공급 시스템 및 수질 관리라는 주제로 크리스토퍼 최 위스콘신 주립대 교수님께서 발표해 주시겠습니다. 최 교수님께서는 급배수 관방 시스템 설계와 관방 수질 관리 전문가로 수돗물 수질 관리와 운영 정책 분야에 많은 경험과 학식을 가지고 계십니다. 미국에서는 공급과정 수질 관리를 어떻게 하는지, 수돗물 운용률 향상을 위하여 어떤 정책들을 추진하고 있는지 알아보도록 하겠습니다. 최 교수님을 힘찬 박수로 맞아주시기 바랍니다.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I would like to introduce water distribution system, which is fairly well related to consumer satisfaction in terms of water quality and tap water drinking. And I have quite a lot of experience in this area. I've been in the United States more than 30 years, and I've been a professor and doing research on water and water systems for about 25 years. So I have known water issues in the United States, and at the same time, I come to Korea almost every year, and I get to see the development and water quality and how we drink water in Korea, and so I can compare the American system as well as a Korean system as well. So here is the statistics of tap water drinking. In the United States, I always wondered that why American citizens drink only 55%, 56% in terms of tap water, and the rest of them are drinking bottled water and other sources, and that's a social issue. Particularly in recent years, water companies, they tend to sell bottled water quite aggressively, so we try to educate public in many different ways. And then if you compare with other countries such as Canada and Japan, actually United States is citizens drink water higher than other nations. On the other hand, I kind of wonder that why Korean citizens do not drink water, only 5%, and then whenever I come to Korea and I get to drink water, and then I see the water quality, which is very much comparable to American water quality standard, and then yet 5% seems way too low, and I wonder why it is the case. And my general thought is probably public outreach in general, and then education. So what I want to show you today is related to tap water drinking and promotion in the United States, and then as opposed to bottled water in particular. And I can give you some examples. American water is not perfect. We do have a lot of problems. While I was in the United States more than 30 years, I've seen many different problems and issues, so that I will introduce 3 cases I'm familiar with, and I did a lot of research in those cases. And then also I will show you some of the overviews of municipal and state, and then federal level of agencies, how they work together. So why and why not tap water, and what's wrong with our tap water? And in the United States, fully, we try to compare tap water as opposed to other sources of water, particularly bottled water, and we do have this kind of problem. This year we did have an outbreak of E. coli and then recalled water, and it's not just an American problem, it's a worldwide problem. And we have seen this in many different ways of the tap water issues, and we are not regulating, bottled water case, we're not regulating bottled water as well. And then, if you compare with other countries such as Canada and Japan, actually United States is citizens drink water higher than other nations. On the other hand, I kind of wonder that why Korean citizens do not drink water, only 5%, and then American water is not perfect. We do have a lot of issues. So what I want to show you today is related to tap water and promotion in the United States, and then as opposed to bottled water in particular. And then there has been a lot of campaign by citizens group in the United States, as well as college students, professors, and they are all recognizing the issues, and the public media in particular. They are coming forward, newspapers and TV channels, they're introducing and take a look at the water-related issues. And here, we see that New York City tap water, which is probably one of the oldest, and chlorine was introduced in New Jersey about 108 years ago. That was the first introduction to public water system. And so if you see the New York City's water distribution system, it's more than 100 years old. And pipelines, we are trying to replace them, and it's 100 years old. As opposed to Seoul's water system is only 40, 50 years old. And we are trying to see if citizens are satisfied with your water. Now, if you give water out of tap and then show and ask, then people would say that bottled water is better. But then if you do blind testing, it's completely different. And this is the outcome. About 45%, approximately 50% of people are satisfied. They picked tap water the best, as opposed to Poland Spring is very popular bottled water in New York because it's made by Nestle. Nestle has hundreds of different brands, and they sell Poland Spring aggressively in New York area, New York, New Jersey area, and the East Coast. And then, therefore, people are very familiar with this particular system. It's more acquired taste rather than water taste itself. And then followed by more expensive water such as oxygenated water or alien water, and those are less popular because they're not used to. So what it says is that about 50% of people are actually drinking tap water, and they are familiar with it. It's a more acquired taste rather than actually really it tastes better, probably not. And then on the other hand, there are many universities that they are banning bottled water completely. And what they see is that they've done life cycle analysis and take classes and water quality classes, and they create environmental activism at the university, on campus. And many universities are banning all the bottled water completely. So at student unions, and they are not allowed to sell bottled water at all. And on the other hand, municipalities, like as one example, Minneapolis in Minnesota, they come forward and try to do the outreach program and try to educate people aggressively. So this is one example, and they work with American Water Works Association, which is a non-profit, and then EPA, government organizations, and many other citizens organizations as well. So this is a coalition between public, local, national, as well as citizens group and the university students together. We are trying to establish that tap water is equal or sometimes better than highly purified water. They claim it's better, which in this case is not really true. So in terms of promotion, we should make sure that people actually drink tap water, and one way to promote is to show that the tap water, what you're drinking, actually tap water, which is as good as any other water systems. And here on the right-hand side, this particular water, it's not refrigerated, it's not cold, yet this can be easily installed at the parks and many other places. And then once we make the water temperature cooler like this, then suddenly people feel that this tastes better. And then on top of that, this is the latest technology, which is not that expensive. If you go to the United States and then see airports and schools and parks, you will see a lot of this particular one on the right-hand side. And it has, you can feel the water, and it has the filter, and also it has the refrigeration. This is the highest possible place you can go. But then last 2 to 3 years, because of the public education and local governments and municipalities, they are trying to install this, and this is not that expensive to install. And then if you go down to the left-hand side, then they are much cheaper. And then people tend to connect, okay, what I am drinking is actually tap water. And they understand if I make it cooler, then it tastes better. And essentially, they feel comfortable of drinking. But then some people do feel chlorine in their water, and they don't like the smell of chlorine. And some people are allergic to chlorine, then they can drink filtered water on the right-hand side. So we populate these in many different locations across the campus and parks and schools, so that people understand what they drink safely is essentially the tap water when they go home. And children go home and then they drink water, it's essentially the same water. So this is the one way to promote tap water drinking. And this is a powerful tool in a ways. And of course, bottled water has its own advantage. For example, we can produce bottled water and then use it during the hurricane or earthquake and for emergencies. Of course we need it. If you go to San Francisco, this system is extremely well stationed and be ready for the major earthquake. However, on the other hand, the cost is enormous to produce, and then we use we recycle only 20% of bottles in the US in reality, and which is quite a waste of energy and resources and greenhouse gas emission. And then it contributes to the global warming, of course. So one last thing is that regulation. Tap water is not 100% regulated in the US. Only 60% is being regulated at the moment. It's a policy problem in the United States, so that we have to tighten up and then try to regulate better. And American tap water system is not perfect, as I indicated earlier, and we are looking at the how safe is safe. We do have chemical and biological, such as microbial issues. And when consumers ask that how safe is safe enough, then we tend to give the number, right? How many people get sick within the city of, say, 1 million people. 1 people died last year because of water, 10 people got sick, or 100 people got sick. That's the number we try to produce in a scientific way. That's quantitative risk assessment. And by far, the most important part is pathogen related, and there are other issues such as chemical, such as chlorine byproduct is cancer causing chemical. So is this more important as opposed to microbial pathogen related issues? And if you calculate it, microbial risk is about 100 to 1 million times safer than chemical. So we give realistic numbers, and this is the by far statistically proven numbers that how safe these are. So we try to produce definitive numbers based on 10, 20, 30 years of history. And then water taste, is that real or perception? And we try to build trust, public trust, and then changes of the perception that tap water is safe. And then try to minimize the chlorine odor, and so we actively try to create the booster injection stations throughout the city, and then we try to also educate people, such as carbon filters or reverse osmosis installed at home. This is a major issue in the United States right now. And these filters and reverse osmosis are getting cheaper, and companies are actively promoting it. And based on the income level, these are really not that expensive in American income level. So people tend to install it, but then the problem is you install it and then you don't change the filter, then what happens? It becomes like biological pathogen growing filters, and after 2 years of not changing, not maintaining filters, they call the water utility and we have a problem, and then they send the people and what kind of problems we have, and it comes with the maintenance problem. So we try to educate people. You don't really have to install those water systems, the filtering system or reverse osmosis, which requires a lot of energy, and why would you do that? And regular water is as safe. Unless you really have sensitive nose and piece, that's not necessary. That's what we are trying to educate people. And then, on the other hand, we do have infrastructure problem. As I said, New York is 100 years old. We have to replace all the pipes there. And the American Civil Engineering Society gave D for the grade. And here is the situation that we have to replace the pipe because they are really aging. So that this is the kind of investment we should make. And then that requires about $1 trillion. So American budget is annually $20 trillion, $1 trillion over next 50 years. That's the magnitude of the investment we need. Yet American water is maintaining its quality and the quantity, and it has been world standard water, high water quality so far, and then we have quite a challenge ahead of us. So we need to invest into the water infrastructure. So in order to do that, we need to fund, and public should understand and what kind of water we drink in order to maintain clean water, clean drinking water. We need to pay for it. And the problem is here, we are paying $1.30 per cubic meter compared to other nations who are paying too little. And we are barely maintaining. That's why our grade is E rather than an A. And so this is a huge problem. And I kind of question this. And Korea is paying 50 cents. I wonder whether this is realistic or not. And probably we need to think about that for the long-term future. And what about tap water versus bottled water in terms of price? And we are paying about 300 times more than tap water by drinking bottled water. And then polluting the environment. And the carbon emission is more than 1,000 times by drinking bottled water because you have to process and then create the water, and it's really unnecessary. And people are now understanding in conjunction with global warming issues, and global warming issues are coming up to the media, and we are trying to couple these issues together and educate people. Therefore, college students are getting very active on this issue. So now, what kind of problems did we have? We had a problem with the Milwaukee cryptosporidium contamination, and this was in 1993. And I live in Madison, Wisconsin, which is the capital of Wisconsin. Milwaukee is located on the east coast. And then here is the Lake Michigan, and Chicago is right here. Chicago is about 1 hour drive distance. So you can get some sense of where it is located. So water comes from Michigan Lake. And then in 1993, about 500,000 of 1.6 million Milwaukee residents became ill. And then out of them, 100 people died. Just imagine that, the magnitude of this outbreak. And yet, instead of blaming anyone, instead of blaming governors, any politicians or anybody who's in charge of the water systems, they worked together to find out what is the cause. Is that scientific, engineering, and what kind of problem is there? And they worked together as a local government and also state government, as well as national, federal level agency came together and solved the problems. Instead of blaming someone, they funded nearly $500 million of money to build a new system and then have double, triple barriers for cryptosporidium. And then the city has become now the national leader for the contaminants and then regain the public trust again. And if you go to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, you will see a lot of people drink tap water. So only within 20-25 years, they completely restored public confidence. This is one example. On the other hand, in the desert of Arizona, I lived in Arizona for 22 years, and the water is very scarce, and the scenery looks like this. And in order to gain the necessary water in Phoenix and Tucson area, they have about 540 kilometers of canal, and then bring the Colorado River water all the way to Tucson, Arizona. And they started planning 1960s, and then construction began 1973, and then completed 1993. And what happened is that the Colorado River water, as opposed to groundwater, is that pH is different. So that when you change the pH, all of a sudden, the pipe systems, particularly with the cast iron, it could produce red water because of iron. So that Tucson water was blamed for that, and then they had to shut down the Colorado River water completely, and then recharge to ground, and then came up with a new system of extracting water, and they spent a decade to do so. And also they came up with a proactive, transparent public policy, and then reported water quality to consumers proactively, and then also smart water sensors at 22 different locations, at remote locations, and then collected the data remotely, and that was funded by EPA. So yet again, instead of blaming anyone, EPA came and helped local district. Okay, we understand the problem, we can help you, how can we help you? So that they funded from the federal government, this is how we monitor, and let's make a sample case. And then this one became an important homeland security center after that because of the national security issues after 9/11. So we now see the quite a safe water distribution network in the middle of the desert, and this is a sort of textbook case how we reach out consumers and then get the water sampling data and then spread out the messages to the consumers. One of the big agendas I was involved with the Tucson Water when I was at the University of Arizona was that the Korean booster stations, if you introduce this kind of high chlorine that people tend to smell, and particularly for those who are sensitive, and then if you are under 0.4, we are risking people with microbial contaminants. So pathogen can grow under this condition. So that we try to introduce booster stations intermittently, and then introduce chlorine, and then it stays within the range. Normal people wouldn't quite detect, or we are not risking microbial contamination, so that we tend to develop this system over kilometers, 10 or 20 kilometers. So this is an important way to ensure that people drink water and then taste better. And but then problem associated with it is that water pipe is not linear, it is quite networked, complicated system. Therefore, you need number theories and optimization and highly mathematical theoretical development behind it, so that they invited university researchers to come up with optimization scheme that where to install water booster stations. So this is one good way to invite people. And then later, US EPA and then Homeland Security came how to develop water security system in this city. So that to see the overall approach in Tucson, they hired water quality experts and listened to consumers over 25 years. Just simply listen to them and troubleshoot each case. And then 22 sensor stations and manual surveillance as well. And then real-time water quality information through internet when internet was first introduced into the city. And then house visits, premise plumbing, water quality assurance programs. They executed over 25 years, and therefore they built consumer trust over 25 years. That is a good example of how much effort it requires to educate people. Now if you go to Tucson, a lot of people drink tap water without any hesitation. So this is quite a milestone for each city that in Tucson and Milwaukee, Wisconsin, they introduced system science and engineering-based problem solving, and they never blame the people or politicians, and they listen to public utilities or federal agencies, and then they make a concerted effort to overcome. And in the meantime, they invested substantially into infrastructure and engaged in high-quality research activities to make it better. And it became the trusted source of information. So people do trust these agencies. That's the key for the success. Now, let's switch the gear to the big city, like New York City. There are many big cities in Korea. And New York City has been built over many hundred years, but then now, last 100 years or so, there are many high-rise buildings and lots of infrastructure and survey systems, and therefore they cannot put the water lines and they cannot dig the ground in Manhattan. So what they do is go down all the way down to 150 meters, 100 meters, and then create tunnel. And the first tunnel near the surface was built in 1917, and then the next one 1936, but then they have not been serviced. And then they realized that we have to build new one to service them. And the way they service is that all the way from the upper Manhattan to Bronx to the Manhattan area, and then Queens and all the way through. It's still on the way. The dotted lines are still on the way. So it's a project of the long run. And what they did was that it's 150 meters deep, nearly 100 kilometers long, and 6 or 7 meters of diameter, and they spent $6 billion. And how they did, they first authorized in 1954 and started building in 1970 and completed in 1993, and then the second stage completed in 1913. And then the third stage is on the way to complete 2018, and then the next stage is under planning. So it's a long-term investment. And this is the most expensive public works in New York City history. Yet they plan long-term, invest into, and then they get the public and the political support. Nobody questions New York's water infrastructure, why you spend $6 billion. And they gained this confidence over the time and then carefully plan and execute. Now, let's go to the federal, regional, and local collaboration. We have EPA, CDC involved with water, and public health systems in the state level, and then local level, there are many municipalities. There are even private companies involved. And what we do is that the EPA regulates all kinds of water quality, and of course, the most important part is coordination. And in a scale of the United States, it is very important to make sure that the most important problem, microbial contamination, so that in order to do that, they always make sure that chlorine level is appropriate. On the other hand, we do have chromium 6 or new jet fuel related chemical, and which is rather relatively new. So chromium 6 was very well known because of the movie Aaron Brockovich, and that's a very, very famous movie that because of the groundwater contamination in California, and then the recent issue, and EPA stepped up and then see each case that how risky is it to the public and address those issues one at a time. And then of course, latest one is hydraulic fracking. There are lots of fracking on the way to extract oil, and which reduces oil price recently. So those are on the way. Like it's more like last few years in the case. So they address each and single items and address those people to the public that these are problems and this is the risk, and the people do trust their research and development and then understand the issues without losing the big picture. CDC is the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and they have a huge public health surveillance, such as how many diarrhea drugs are sold in certain places, and if there is a peak, and they use big data analysis. So if a certain community is buying water-related diarrhea medicine, then they go to there and check water quality. And then they do have outbreak response team, and also they do issue drinking water advisories in collaboration with local utilities, so that as people respect the agency and trust the agency, once they issue advisories or warnings, public tends to follow CDC's direction. So they run 24/7 hotline for the public. So that how it works in the US is that we have two big federal agencies in addition to FDA, of course, and then state and local utilities or governance, and then we work together. And then as a unit, consistently we issue warnings and also explain the problems, and that's how things work. That's how people trust tap water. So in summary, I would like to make a few suggestions, such as in order to promote tap water drinking, it may be easy to start with something simple, such as introduce these water fountains, and then make sure that these people are understanding that they are drinking tap water, and indeed they are safe and taste is as good as or even better than bottled water. And at the same time, I want to make sure that if you go to United States parks and schools, they tend to maintain this and clean it regularly, so that there isn't any athletic or maintenance problem, which is very important for the public relations. And so that's one important recommendation. And then second recommendation would be a little bit higher level, such as a long-term strategic infrastructure planning, rather than doing so quickly. And also, they are engaged with high-level research and development, and then actually apply the activities to the water distribution system, and then investment in human capital. Really, people will make the difference. K-water researchers or field workers, engineers and chemists, those are the people, microbiologists, those are the people who will make the difference to reach out to consumers. And then I suggest that real-time sensor systems and big data analytics, which are already on the way, and then optimization schemes and advanced modeling tools to improve water distribution system and chlorine booster station locations, and then scheduling flushing. So sediment flushing that could cause problems or microbial problems and other issues. And that's something to consider for the future. And then sensor locations and monitoring stations can be part of optimization schemes for water distribution system. So with that, I would like to see within next 2 years or so, why not 80% or why not 70-80% in Korea, considering its water quality, why don't we accomplish that? And I'm sure Americans and Canadians and Japanese all try to achieve that goal. And why don't we save money and invest into infrastructure and also reduce the carbon emission, greenhouse gas emission. That is very, very important for the world. Thank you.
최교수님께서 발표하신 내용 중에 궁금하신 사항이나 질문하실 사항이 있으시면 간단하게 한 2분만 받겠습니다. 2분만 받고 다음으로 이제 하도록 하고요. 그렇게 하겠습니다. 질문하실 분은 손을 들어주시면 마이크를 전달하도록 하겠습니다.
안녕하십니까. K-워터 충청 지역 본부의 이정은입니다. 우리 미국의 그 수돗물과 그 관망 관리를 위한 여러 가지 노력 발표들을 잘 들었는데요. 제가 궁금한 것은 수돗물 홍보를 주정부 차원에서 굉장히 강하게 시행을 하고 있고 또 일부 지역에서는 병물 판매를 금지하고 있기도 한데 이와 관련해서 그 산업계에서 혹시 반발은 없는지 먹는 샘물을 판매하는 산업계의 반발은 없는지 또 있다면 어떻게 핸들링하고 있는지 좀 궁금합니다.
So thanks for the question. That's a very good question. And indeed, if you think of industry, and that means Nestle, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, and their carbonated sugar water, such as Coca-Cola, their sales is coming down. And what they are making money is water, and also filter companies, of course. And it's an important issue for them. But then we are really talking about truth about the water quality. And if you talk about science and engineering, there shouldn't be any question when you talk about the truth. So I wonder how many people understand how big Nestle is. They make the most profit out of bottled water. It's larger than Samsung Corporation of this country. And they sell bottled water, and then they created a company larger than Samsung Corporation. And I kind of wonder that's a good way to make money for the entire humanity, for the entire world. And I think that if we tell the truth, there cannot be any questions to ask, right? And then there are many citizens group to question that there are many independent firms to expose what Nestle is doing. In the US, such as Poland water is one big issue that they took on. And also in India, Pakistan, they are trying to create such a system like Poland water, and they show what is the reality and why it's damaging our environment and also our future. And if you tell the truth, then they cannot be offensive. They are rather very defensive nowadays. That's what we see in the United States. So I think the trend is rather positive, but in my personal opinion, it's rather too slow to change the trend. We have to be much more aggressive as the citizens group to tell the reality, what is really the truth about the water quality. Any other questions?
네, 감사합니다. 시간 관계상 질문은 여기까지 받도록 하고요. 다음 순서로 넘어가도록 하겠습니다. 오늘 미국 사회를 소개해 주신 크리스토퍼 최 교수님께 힘찬 박수 부탁드립니다. 다음은 네덜란드 워터 알리언스의 한스 우터스 물 전문가께서 건강한 수돗물 공급을 위한 네덜란드의 사례에 대해 발표해 주시겠습니다. 네덜란드 워터 알리언스는 네덜란드 물 관련 정부, 기업, 연구소 등의 파트너십으로 이루어진 기관으로 네덜란드 물산업 육성 및 음용 정책 발굴을 통해 네덜란드가 물관리 강국으로 자리매김하는 데 중요한 역할을 하고 있습니다. 한스 우터스 전문가님을 힘찬 박수로 맞이해 주시기 바랍니다.
Thank you very much. What I would like to share with you this afternoon is Dutch experience. In the Netherlands, we've been looking at water quality for quite a long time, and about 30-40 years ago, we started to get into a situation where we said, if we are dosing chlorine, we are creating some non-acute health risks instead of preventing acute health risks. And these non-acute health risks have led to the understanding that we would like to enter into a world where we are producing chlorine-free drinking water. And that has been established. We have now a system in place in the Netherlands where we do not use any chlorine whatsoever in our drinking water supply. And what I would like to share with you this afternoon is to tell you a little bit of how we did that, what did we do in the treatment system, what did we do with the distribution system, just to give you a little bit of an understanding of how that is possible. And of course, I would like also to highlight a little bit of the costs involved, because everything it comes at a price. And if you have an extensive treatment scheme with all kinds of advanced treatment processes, then the price will be accordingly. And that is about awareness for people to pay this price, and let's say the public accepting that good quality water is valuable, is hence also something you'd like to pay for. If you look at the standards, then the standards, of course, of drinking water supply in the Netherlands are not much different than those from the European Union. And these standards are all related to creating safe drinking water. If you focus on the chlorine aspect of the disinfection aspect of drinking water supply in Europe, this graph illustrates very nicely that there are various ways of creating a bacteriologically safe drinking water. In a lot of countries in the European Union, chlorine and chlorine dioxide is still used for disinfection. Actually, the Netherlands is a little bit of a weird position in Europe, because we are the only country which does not use any chlorine or chlorine dioxide whatsoever. UV is used also considerably, and all kinds of combinations. I will come to that later if I focus a little bit on the situation in the Netherlands. If you try to understand what you should do if you are in a position where you are dosing chlorine into the final drinking water prior to feeding it into the distribution system, if you are thinking of what the downside of that is in relation to the disinfection byproducts and chlorophores which are formed, then in order to shift from that side to the other side, where you are trying to achieve chlorine-free drinking water, then you have a number of steps to take. And this is a graph which we took from the research institute in the Netherlands responsible for drinking water supply, KWR. You have to start with an intention. The intention was driven by trying to create a healthy tap water without any long-term negative effects related to chlorine byproducts. Then you have to set the criteria. You have to evaluate the present situation, where you come from. You have to fill in the gaps, do a lot of research, and research has been executed very elaborately in the Netherlands in the last 30 years. Then you have to implement the change, and then afterwards you have to monitor and evaluate continuously in order to find out that what you're doing is the right thing and there's no health risk involved. Standards, as I said, are more or less in line with the European Union. In the Netherlands we have a number of standards which are on top of that introduced in order to be on the safe side. I'll not go into the details of that. And we focused on the alternative disinfection schemes, which are a number. You can think of combinations of ozone and activated carbon, nanofiltration, UV peroxide in combination with ozone, riverbank filtration is very popular in combination with activated carbon and nanofiltration. And also one of the latest schemes has been implemented with ion exchange and ceramic microfiltration. As I said, the water quality goals is all about public health. And therefore we have more or less 4 key criteria, starting with using the best water source available. So you can better use groundwater if that's available, because that's safe in itself. And if that's not available, you can look at surface water and potentially use artificial recharge or bank filtration to create an extra barrier for bacteria to die. And last but not least, surface water schemes, which create a direct treatment of water and requires multiple barriers. Use advanced treatment, and I took into this sheet the focus on assimilable organic carbon. That's a major goal set by the drinking water companies in the Netherlands to achieve a less than 10 microgram per liter carbon concentration for AOC in order to prevent biofilm growth, or at least in order to keep within limits biofilm growth within the distribution system. And then of course the distribution system is important. So try to prevent the ingress of contamination during the distribution. Our system is fully metered. We have a small non-revenue water percentage. Real losses are in the range of 2.5%, and illegal tapping is nearly absent. So that means that we have everything reasonably well under control, although in the next decades we have to invest heavily in replacing all the distribution systems. And everything is leading towards trying to prevent microbial growth in the distribution system. Well, there are a number of treatment schemes. I will not go into the details of that. I'm trying to keep to the highlights. Artificial recharge is a very well introduced system in the Netherlands. It requires picking up surface water, pre-treating it, and infiltrate the pre-treated surface water into an area where it can stay for 60, 90 days before it is abstracted from the area. So the extraction canal is on the right-hand side, the recharge point is in the middle, and then the water flows through the underground, and the quality of the water will then essentially be improved. Also the buffering capacity is an asset, and also the ability to smooth, to decrease the variation in water quality which is present in the surface water. Talk about temperature, talk about variations in some other parameters. They are all smoothed off during the infiltration. This is a nice, very nice area, dune area, a little bit west of the city of Amsterdam. And this is an area where the water supply company is responsible for the nature. And they are doing that by having these infiltration canals, all well in place, all well secured. It's a very nice natural area where you can see the deer walking around. It's very nice to walk around as a person there. And this area is well maintained because of the function of using it as an area where we are infiltrating future drinking water. Going into the treatment works itself, I will not highlight the details of each process scheme in order to speed up the presentation a little bit, but this is a typical scheme for treating surface water with advanced treatment in order to prevent any chloride addition at the end. So basically we are picking up the surface water. There is a standard coagulation, sedimentation, centrifiltration. Then we start the ozonation, breaking up the organic material. We have a softening stage, which tries to focus on achieving a level of softness of the water of 1.5 millimole per liter. And then a biological activated carbon filtration with a high residence time in the order of 40 to 50 minutes in order to pick out the organic matter, degrade the organic matter which has been oxidized in the step prior to the activated carbon. And then, last but not least, the slow centrifiltration. It's a very old-fashioned technology, but it is very effective in trying to create a bacteriological barrier. This system has been applied in the UK and the Netherlands for more than 100 years, and it is still very effective in creating a bacteriological barrier. Here are some pictures of the treatment works with the ozone generators and the facilities at the Amsterdam Water Works. Then focusing on the distribution, because then you've made a perfect quality drinking water, but the distribution can do in the distribution system a lot can go wrong if that is not well designed. So the residence time in the distribution system should be limited. So that's the reason why the distribution system is designed to create a certain maximum residence time. And we are focusing on pipe materials which are not so much prone to biofilm formation. So the biofilm formation is one of the issues which we are taking into consideration when we are designing the system. And as I said, we are trying to create a biostable water which does not tend to create any biofilms in the distribution system. So the focus is on AOC levels less than 10 micrograms per liter. We have a variety of materials in the distribution system, and some of them, like for instance polyethylene, are quite prone to biofilm formation, so we tend not to use that anymore in the future upgrades. The operating organization, I will not go into the details of that. Personnel development, I'll forget that, you can see that in the meetings. The organizational structure, I think, is also important. If you look at the countries in Europe, there are various organizational structures in the public water supply. In the Netherlands, the water utilities are governmental owned, and that means is that the shareholders are the municipalities and the provinces. And these shareholders, they do not have direct involvement in the day-to-day running of the company, but they do supervision. And they have basically two items where they have their influence, and that is regarding the tariffs, the new tariff proposals, and about the annual report and what is reported. There is an annual dividend for the public shareholders, which means that they are gaining a little bit on their shareholdership for these water companies, although water companies as itself are not created to make profits. Then the consumer awareness. As I said, in the Netherlands we are trying to distribute chlorine-free drinking water, and as a consequence we are also very much focusing on consumer awareness. And in the Netherlands, if you've seen the percentages of tap water usage in the USA, we tend to use more than 90% of our consumers are using tap water for drinking, for making coffee, for making tea. So that's really a large portion of the total. And we are monitoring how they like this water. So in a range of 0 to 10, they are ranking the tap water quality as 8.3, and that is monitored every day. We are focusing on a number of figures. Hardness is important. Price is of course also important, but it's not that important if you relate that to other utility costs. And I think there should be a 0 in between this one, so it's 2.2 euro cents per liter of water is the price. And also environmental issues related to bottled water are at stake. So nowadays in the restaurant it's very normal as a consumer to ask for the waiter to bring in a carafe of tap water instead of bottled water. So then you get your tap water together with the food, and that is quite normal, and it is quite acceptable. What the water quality index in the Netherlands is measured in 4 parameters, looking at the acute health parameters, the non-acute health parameters, the operational parameters, and the customer-oriented parameters, which are telling you something about how the consumer likes the water. I will not go into the details of them all, but if you look at the customer-oriented parameters. The score is quite high. I think in the readings you can see how the score is calculated. The focus is on hardness of the water and the color of the water, which means that should be in the right range. The water should not have any color, and the hardness should be in the range of 1.5 nanomole per liter in order to use that very well also for the laundry, etc. This is an interesting sheet. We are, as I said, we are having a system where the consumers are using quite a lot of tap water for the day-to-day consumption. If you look at the bottled water use, you can see in average in the European Union we are using about 104 liters per annum of bottled water, and that is, in Mexico for instance, is 255. In the Netherlands we are only using 22 liters per annum, which is very low in comparison to, for instance, our neighbor country, which is Belgium, which is using, what is it, 7 times as much. What is our investment strategy? These drinking water companies are basically owned by the government through the municipalities and the provinces. And there is a determination of the WACC percentage which can be invested, which can be put on balance for invested capital. And the operational profits are then used for payments of interest, the Millennium Development Goals, a small percentage, dividend, and the submission of equity for future investments. So that's the main strategy which these companies need to use in order to have a, let's say, a cost neutral balance sheet. So what are we doing in the near future? We are focusing on a number of areas. One is the microbiology, the sources for Legionella infections, particularly in hospitals. That's quite important, and in larger houses for the elderly. Micropollutants is a continuous issue at stake. This summer we had a severe wastewater discharge in the area which was used for river water intake, and it took us quite a few weeks to identify which parameter was at stake. We had intake reservoirs which we could close, so the water supply was never in danger. But that's something which is then continuously monitored in order to be able to identify any species, any parameters which are above the levels we'd like to focus at. Water sources, although you could say the Netherlands is a very wet country, we still have drought problems in summer periods where the river flows are quite low. And drinking water infrastructure, I already indicated there's a lot to invest in that. Pricing, well, it's all in line with what you already heard, so I won't go into the details of that. It depends a little bit where you live, whether you have groundwater as a source for drinking water supply, or when you live in the western part of the Netherlands, it's more surface water, which is more expensive. And I would like to conclude with this photograph which was taken last week when Dr. Kim and Dr. Sol were in the Netherlands, and we were sharing some experiences at the KWR Institute for Water Research in the Netherlands. I would like to thank you.
시간은 정확하게 20분을 맞추신 것 같습니다.
네, 발표 감사히 잘 들었습니다. K워터 대구 경북본부 서혜영입니다. 예, 말씀해 주셨듯이 지금 네덜란드에서는 소독 부산물 생성을 최소화하기 위해서 상수원부터 유기물을 관리하고 염소를 사용하지 않는 소독 시스템을 도입하고 관망 내 유기물 농도 최소화 유지, 그리고 보도 정수 처리 등 여러 가지 과정에서 이렇게 처리 과정을 두고 있는 것으로 알고 있습니다. 이러한 수독 시설을 건설, 운영하기 위해서 많은 재원이 필요할 것이라고 생각되는데요. 모두 수도 요금으로 충당이 가능하신지가 궁금하고, 그리고 한국의 수도 요금이 지역마다 차이가 있긴 하지만 400원에서 500원 정도 하는데
그 네덜란드 수도 요금이 좀 비싼 것 같더라고요. 그런데 소비자들의 저항은 없는지, 그리고 마지막으로 수도 요금 인상은 어떤 식으로 이루어지는지가 궁금합니다.
Yes, I understood your question. Thank you for that. Well, actually, the price of the water in the Netherlands is indeed quite high. But I must say, the general public is not very aggressive in trying to drive the price down. So what I'm saying is, if you compare, let's say, the overall utility costs which a consumer has to pay, then electricity and gas is absolutely number one in monthly payments. And if you look at, let's say, drinking water, that's actually the lowest of the four utilities which you have to pay for. And the fourth is then wastewater treatment. So actually, the Dutch tend to say that they would like to have the best quality water which they can use as tap water, and basically they can save quite a lot of money by using tap water for various kinds of consumption ways. If you have to pay a bottle of water in the store, then the costs will be massively much higher than if you are using your tap water. So no, there is no debate about the pricing structure. Of course, the provinces and municipalities are responsible for keeping the prices as low as possible, but if there is any investment to be made in order to secure the safety of the drinking water, then that investment will definitely go on. It will never be blocked by financial reasons.
예, 감사합니다. 네덜란드 사례를 소개해 주신 한국수 리터스님께 다시 한번 큰 박수 부탁드립니다. 다음으로 싱가포르 의왕기업인 PUB 일본 국수위원으로부터 시수원으로부터 수도꼭지까지 전 가정 수질 관리에 대한 싱가포르의 사례를 듣도록 하겠습니다. PUB는 싱가포르 내 상하수도 물 재생시설을 건축하는 물 전문 기관입니다. 특히 지난 1972년부터는 사용된 물, 즉 하수를 유명수로 정화하는 수처리 시설을 개발하여 싱가포르 전체 유명수의 30%를 공급하고 있는 수처리 분야의 선두기업으로 수질관리 분야에 많은 노하우를 보유하고 있습니다.林문홍 수석위원님을 힘찬 박수로 맞이해 주시기 바랍니다.
Thank you. K-Water President Choi and K-Water Senior Management and distinguished guests and all the water experts in the hall. Very good afternoon to you. First, I would like to thank K-Water for the invitations to come to give a presentation, and I'm very happy to share with you that what and how we manage water quality in Singapore. And I believe I got too many slides, so I probably need to skip some of the slides to just go to the important points in order that we are not too overly behind time. Thank you. Okay, some of you may not know Singapore well. I just give you some statistics because the statistics of Singapore play a larger role actually in determining that how our water strategy and our water policy has to go. First, you look at our population is 5.4 million. Land area is 710. So from here you can see that it's actually very small. Singapore is very small. Population density is 7,600 per square kilometer square. Annual rainfall is very high, 2,400. Sorry, this should be mm. It's not cm. 2,400 mm. And daily demand is 1.8 million gallon. We use imperial gallon, right? So our coverage of potable water and sewage is more 100% in Singapore. I actually made some comparison with Korea. The reason is just to show you actually Singapore is very small and congested. Being small and too congested, the idea about we have to pay a lot of attention on pollution, water quality. You know that when you have human activities, chances of pollutions activities are always there, right? So key point here is comparatively in terms of you have big land, but in terms of population density is 514, but we have 7,600, and our land area is very small. So, and you look at the in terms of rainfall, we have a lot of rainfall, but before year 2000, Singapore is still considered as a water scarce country. The reason is the land we have is just too small to catch all the water. So technically, if we can catch all the water, we should not be water scarce. Right, the objective of my talk is actually to ensure safe drinking water. Actually, it's a very simple and very clear objective to ensure that all water collected can be treated for drinking, and drinking water is always safe for consumption. The second one is also very important. I think is relate quite well with today's topics about confidence in the public to drink tap water. And especially in Singapore, I think some of you know that we are tapping unconventional sources like we have new water, we go into desalination for water. So these are normally unconventional, but we have to make sure that the public confidence is maintained for them to drink tap water. The principle of our water quality management essentially is a preventive approach rather than a kind of, I call it endpoint, a lot of people endpoint. I elaborate a little bit here. Traditionally, to say that water is safe, we take the water sample, we test all the parameters based on WHO standard or whatever standard. If it passes all the parameters, then you say the water is safe, right? That is reactive. The question and the biggest issue now here, if the water fails, by that time it's too late because the water has already been supplied. So the approach, this approach actually is kind of encouraged by World Health Organization, is to take a preventive approach. You prevent the things from happening. So to do that, you need to put in place a water safety plan. You do your hazard analysis, know where are your control points. I'll go slightly in detail for this. And of course, another thing we call it multi-barrier approach. That means you have many steps. So in case one step fails, you have second step or third step to make sure that you still can capture the problem. So the preventive measure is through process control. So when we say preventive, how do we prevent? The preventive here is you go through the process. So the principle here that if you make sure that every step in the process are correctly performed, chances are the endpoint of the water product will meet the specification. So basically it's quite a simple principle. So in our water quality management, we call quality management, essentially there are 5 parts of it. The most important part is to have a water safety plan. I'll go through the other parts in detail. You notice that R&D is also play another part in water quality management. The others are monitoring, auditing, intelligent. You need to have a system to manage all. You have a lot of water quality data. Then how do you make use of data? You need a system. And then water quality security in case of contamination. How to capture contamination, how to get early signal of contamination, then how to respond to every cases of contaminations. So I'll first talk about water safety plan. So essentially, this is actually just now I talked about the endpoint testing is too late and too little. Too little in the sense that when you test all the parameters, you are testing based on WHO standard. Maybe it is 102 or 100, US EPA 100 something. So you are talking about 100 parameters. But in principle, we know that there are many things beyond these 100 parameters. But the reason we don't test them because we don't expect them to be there. So here, but if you make sure that you make sure your process of treatment is done properly, chances are all these are not there. So the reason of too little is that, and too little in the sense of from the microbial perspective, in the WHO standard, there's only one microbial parameter, the E. coli. But we know that there are many other pathogens in water, but we are not testing it. So the important point is to make sure your process is right. So what is that relate to water safety plan is actually a prevention, still prevention through process control. So you do risk assessment and you manage your risk. So everything comes with a risk. So how big? So I will go in detail how is the framework of water safety plan in Singapore. We have a regulator. This is to regulate PUB in terms of water quality. And the regulation is based on health-based target, all the standards and parameters. Then within PUB, this spot is within PUB, what PUB does. We form the water safety, we have come up with a water safety plan. So the regulator wants PUB to have water safety plan. So in the water safety plan, first you set up a water safety team. The team consists of all the experts in. You have chemists, you have microbiologists, you have E&M engineers to look at the pump, all these things will come in. And this team, what you do, they do a system assessment. You look at where are the points a possible hazard can come into the whole process. So with that, they set up, okay, these are the critical points, they do monitoring. Then if there's something wrong, how to manage them, how to communicate with the residents, with the populations about that. So this is within PUB. Then on top of that, you need surveillance and audit, because it's no use that internally you think that you are doing good, you need an assessment from outside to look at whether you are doing good or not. Actually, this is taken from WHO, so we base very closely on WHO approach in getting the water safety assessment. This is another chart that I'll go real quick. Is actually I briefly talk about it. So when we talk about water system, you include the reservoir, water treatment plant, and water distribution system. So water safety is just not only treatment. It involves your source, your reservoir, and as well as your distribution. So you do hazard assessment, you find out how to control, and then how to monitor, then how to correct the action. You establish a complete plan. HACCP is hazard analysis and critical control point. Basically, you know where can go wrong and how to control them. You prepare documentation and you review this periodically. So in Singapore, our regulator wants PUB to put up water safety plan or review every year. Or when you change your system, you have to put up a water safety plan. So if I look at it, to put in short, that the whole holistic approach of water management, first you have to start with the reservoir, the source water. Where can the source water quality goes wrong? When? Which part? How to prevent it? Where is the monitoring point? How to control them? So you start with that. Then you look at your water treatment plant or your multi-barrier with respect. Then in the water treatment plant, you also establish control points. How to know that something is wrong. I'll go to that a little bit more. Then the third part is the distribution. Then you need to have a comprehensive water quality monitoring, because that is, you need probably to do all the water testing. So when I say endpoint testing is too late or too little, it doesn't mean that you do away with all the water testing. You still need to do water testing as a monitoring tool to make sure the process is correct. But it's not to so-called to prevent the water safety event, right? So how we do it, the watershed, we protect the water catchment. So these are quite a conventional way we do. We do erosion control, we do catchment surveillance. We have online system for all the reservoirs, the online system to measure the conductivity, pH, algae, with even some of the online that you can measure, for example, turbidity, those things. So the online system will look at reservoir, so you have a sense of how good the reservoir water at real time. So in terms of water treatment, we have two concepts. In Singapore, Singapore is highly urbanized. There's one part of catchment is within the jungle. We call it protective catchment. So in the protective catchment, the water quality is relatively much better. So in that case, what you need is your traditional water treatment process is good enough. But when it comes to urbanized catchment, for urbanized catchment, water comes from urbanized catchment, we add in ozonation and biological activated carbon filters. So then in the water works, that's why I mentioned that we control the process. So at each process, these are all our control points. At each process, the pH, this is what we expect it to be. So at every point, at clear water tank, and all these things are measured online. So at any time, you know that whether your treatment, your process is performing well. Come to distribution, I think this it was covered in the earlier speaker talked about it. I think it's almost the same. You have a closed system. You don't allow people to take it, and then you have to have your repair procedure, comprehensive water quality monitoring. You have good code of practice, those kind of things. So this shows where our sampling point in Singapore. We have 124 sampling points that we sample every day. These are manual sampling, and we are now looking into putting sensors, about 200 to 300 sensors in the network to try to detect the water quality in real time. So the next thing, you need a system to manage all the quality. You look at it, you have your daily sampling quality, you have your online data for every water work. Then in Singapore, we have this service reservoir where they store the finished product water, then you need to monitor them. So you have a lot of data, so you need to manage all this data. So basically, it's a computerized system. I go real quick. You have data, these are the lab data, online quality data, you collection, finally you do analysis and reporting. So these are all it can be a real-time analysis. And this can, sometimes the online can trigger water quality events. These water quality events, I'll quickly go through it. If you see that you have an event, right? Events, how do you know it's an event? Because your online trigger that you have certain control points, your online data trigger that there is an event. You activate your plan, then start your, we have this lab, then the lab emergency response plan will kick in. So in short, how do we detect water quality online? What do we do monitoring water quality online? These are we call it surrogate parameters. I think this one, all you know about it. And then we have this biological toxicity also put online. We use fish. We use fish to detect the abnormality in water quality. So in the lab response, I'll put it as 3 tiers. The first tier, you straight away you scan within about 30 minutes to half an hour. You look for toxic matter, right? And then within about 4 hours, you do all the tests, your GCMS test, your IC, you screen through all the heavy metals. Within 4 hours, you more or less, you have a screening result of presence of either is it chemical contamination or microbial contamination. Of course, to identify what are the contaminants, you need about 24 to 48 hours. Basically, some of the microbial contaminants you need to culture them many times to see how they to see their growth. So monitoring and auditing, yes, we have we have this water quality monitoring. You look at the blue one is online, all the online sensors. Red one is manual. So even online, they are online monitoring as well as their grad sample. Grad sample is to make sure that the online is working fine. So you look at it, you know Singapore has new water, part of the new water is discharged into reservoir. So in the new water process, it's being monitored online. And then in the reservoir, this one go into the treatment work, go to raw water, we have online and all the sensors and grad samples, and all the way go in the process, we have online and grad samples. Until distribution, we have grad samples, but we have already installed 25 sensors in the city area, and this has been going on for about 3 years. It's under testing. So the testing shows that the result is promising, and we are going to roll out about 200 to 300, about 300 in total sensors to put in the network. So in terms of strategy, this is our monitor frequency. I wouldn't want to go to detail. Monitoring, what we monitor for, we look at WHO, we also look at USCPA. This is Singapore itself, the regulator has their standards. And on top of that, we have our internal operational control. This operational control are the set point that we set to make sure the process is right. Of course, it will be more stringent than all the standards. So that before you reach the operation control, if there's some alert telling you that you are going out of the operation control, then the operator will have to take action to bring it back. So that you still have time before the water quality reach the standards. So in short, in terms of quality monitoring strategy, you have your operations parameters that you do every day. More frequently, we do daily some of the important general parameters. Some to meet the regulations, you do it like some are daily, some are annually. And comprehensive here, we mean that we actually monitor in total 333 parameters. And this will include all the emerging contaminants, the PPCPs, hormones, and pesticides, all these chemicals. But you know that Singapore, we do not have agriculture, but we still monitor all these things because we look at it, Singapore catchment is quite unique by itself. 2/3 of Singapore is highly urbanized, and 2/3 of Singapore is being used as water catchment. So we want to be more kind of preventive rather than reactive. So this shows that in terms of we are monitoring at this frequency, this number of parameters that we are monitoring. So of course we need a lab. So we have 5 labs: biology, organic, and general labs. Then this is an audit panel. We have international audit. The first audit is a regulator, then we have internal audit and external audit. So the audit, every 6 months we have an audit going on. So this is the areas of audit. They look at our water quality, our sampling plan, and they also look at some of the operation maintenance issue, and some big projects include staff training. Lastly is what are the emerging issues, the new issues. So, okay, it's the last part of it, R&D. The lab also do a lot of R&D, for example, trying to detect the water quality. I'll show you some of the examples. So these are the R&D into water quality sensors. The reason we want the sensors, we want to develop quick and cheap sensors. For example, this Optiqua, I think is a Netherlands company, and that day when I speak to Hans, we talk about this. So they are developed using reflective index to detect change in water quality as a general surrogate to tell you that there is some change in water quality. So this has been actually, we work with them in the R&D. So R&D, this ceramic membrane, this one we also work with another Holland company, PWN, right, and to try to demonstrate the ceramic membrane as opposed to polymeric membrane. We also, this is done by our lab, trying to detect nanoparticles, because nanoparticles is another next thing. Nanotechnology is exploding, and people start thinking about what will be the health impact with nanoparticles. So before we can even go to that, we need to detect them. So there's no standard protocol in the world to detect nanoparticles. There are some using this ICP-MS to try to detect nanoparticles. So we follow that. So we are trying to also develop protocol, and we have done this. We have done a few sets of data on this. So this is also kind of true research that we come to this. This is about more administrative, because I put in this slide kind of last minute, just to show that in terms of, this is more, not so much of quality, it's a strategy. You can see that pricing is a strategy to encourage water conservation. And these 4 national taps is Singapore resource. I told you, we new water, we sell water, we import water from Malaysia, and we have our own water. So that we normally call the 4 national taps. The others is pricing, because today I hear something about pricing. I thought pricing is also something is important. So what we do is, in Singapore, we price it at the cost of producing the next alternative drop in addition to the current drop. So this is what our PM said in 2011. So you can see that our pricing now, you look at domestic and non-domestic, they are the same. That means the industry, they are the same. Because they are actually paying the cost of water. There's no kind of subsidy. And industries to Singapore is good because you bring in the economy. So previously, industry tends to be much higher than the domestic. Domestic is around, if I can remember, this figure, instead of 117 cents, it was like previously it was about 50 cents. So the government think that water should reflect its own value. Then over 5 years, it reached this figure. This figure was in 2000 and until now it still stays at $1.17. Okay, challenges, well, I think we face the same challenges as utilities, similar as in K-Water, right? In our case, we have urban catchment, the first one. The urban catchment, we close the water loop. Because PUB, we manage drinking water, wastewater, river water, reservoir water, so all the catchment water, all the waterways and rivers. So all these, the water quality is being monitored. Then our catchment is slightly different. And then of course climate change is another topic that will affect water quality, we all know. The other thing is the standard getting more and more stringent, and there are emerging contaminants. People talk about, like for example, hormones and these drugs in water. I think you hear some news about all these drugs in water. And the other part, of course, seawater operation and strategy, because in the desalination plant, we need to look at seawater. That to us is also a challenge that we are facing. In terms of distribution, of course, our final objective that water in the distribution should be chemically and biologically stable. So I think Holland and Netherlands have done very well in terms of controlling the biological stability. But Singapore, we are in a tropical climate, so we also have to kind of look into, try to do the best that we can to make the water chemically and biologically stable. The last part is the expectation from the public, of course. The expectation is always rising. On this one, I just in passing talk about it. In terms of water safety, PUB, our water quality office is the collaboration center with WHO. So we look at all these water safety issues, public health issues. Some of the things that we have done, maybe just to give you research into low risk of bromine. So bromine is currently regulated at 10 ppb. So, but the science article says that they may be over-regulated because the moment bromine gets into your mouth, the moment you add it, it turns into bromine, and bromine is not so toxic. So they are regulating based on bromine. So there are things still going on that. It's still WHO guideline. I want to go into this. We help development of the drinking water quality in Laos with WHO. And some of the humanitarian assistance to Typhoon Haiyan in Philippines. And currently ongoing, we are trying to develop the WHO portable reuse guidelines. So we are working with WHO on that. With that, okay, thank you very much. 감사합니다.
한 분만 질문을 받고 다음 넘어가도록 하겠습니다.
네, 안녕하십니까. 수자원공사 강원지역본부의 변창영이라고 합니다. 싱가포르 PUB에서 하고 있는 많은 수질관리 활동과 먹는물 관리에 큰 많은 인상을 받았습니다. 제가 알고 있기로는 싱가포르가 그 인구 밀도에 비해서 원수량이 부족해서 많은 원수를 활용하고 있다고 들었습니다. 기본적으로 이제 싱가포르 내부에 있는 저수지를 사용한다던가 아니면 하수 제2호수를 사용한다던가 또 해수 담수와 또는 또 인도네시아에서 물을 사오는 방법들로 해서 원수를 많이 차용하고 있는데요. 아까 설명 가운데 이제 수돗물 값을 전부 다 동일하게 처리하는 내용이 나와서 혹시 이제 생산 원가가 각 방식에 따라 다르게 되는데 그에 따른 이제 수돗물 값을 동일화하는 데에서 국민들이 좀 반대나 문제를 제기하진 않는지 첫 번째 궁금하고요. 두 번째로 이제 하수 처리수를 재이용해서 이제 먹는물로 활용하는 문제가 좀 최근에 지금 한국에서도 화두가 되고 있는 것 같습니다. 가뭄 때문에 그런 이제 먹는물을 확보하기 위한 방식으로 이제 어느 정도 논의가 되고 있는데요. 또 혹시 하수 재이용수를 이용해서 먹는물로 공급하는 지역이 싱가포르에 있다면은 혹시 그런 쪽에서 이제 먹는물에 대한 유치민 문제라던가 그 건강상 문제에 대한 민원이나 지금 의문점 같은 게 혹시 국민들로부터 나오지 않는지 이런 내용에 대해서 좀 궁금합니다.
Thank you for the question. I think if I want to summarize, I want to make sure that I understand your problem correctly. The first one is with respect to, because we have 4 different types of water and we only have one water price. So are there any complaints or any feedback from the public? Okay. For this question is, we have only one single price, and okay, there are a few aspects that I need to address. First thing is, water price is not only treatment. Water price includes a lot of distributions, a lot of storage, a lot of manpower looking at this water quality. So with that, we are saying that we are looking at one price because they have to go through the same distribution pipe. The distribution pipes are all internally connected. So what in desalination is, they still pump into what we call a service reservoir where they store clean water, and from there they still mix with the conventional water and distribute to the people. So it's one price. The second thing to address your question is actually like desalination. We say when we say that we are water stressed, we put in desalination. Desalination to us is a strategic capacity. Strategic capacity means that in terms of drought, we use it a lot. In the normal time, we don't produce a lot of desalination. We just run minimum. So in fact, from day-to-day operation, you look at the water cost. So we are able to just put out as one single water price, and then the company can still kind of maintain that as a one company. Give you an example. Day-to-day, the water production of desalination, we have the capacity of produce 100 mgd, but every day we are producing about 10 to 15 mgd. And it mixed with all the other traditional water, which is about 300 over mgd. So the way in terms of calculating, you probably get a picture that actually it will not affect the thing very much. And anyway, it goes through the same distribution system, equal amount of effort to make sure that the distribution is done equally well for desal water and conventional water. And talk about new water. New water is not used for drinking. New water is mainly used in the industry. So in the industry, new water, I did show you that new water has its own price. But the price, currently new water price, is about the same as the drinking water the price. Still based on cost recovery. The principle is cost recovery, it's the price of the water. So with that, I hope it answered the first question. The second question is about water reuse, about the psychology effect. So this had to tie in water we use here, we use a lot of new water. So new water currently is meeting 30% of Singapore water demand, but because they are using in the industry. So the psychology effect, only about 1 to 2% we put in the reservoir, but to kind of going through the treatment again. So the psychology of drinking new water is not there because they are actually not meant to be drank direct. But then why are we looking at water reuse? We know the world is looking at this. Even California looking aggressively at water reuse, right? So it can be proven if the thing is successful that you don't have to put back reservoir and you can straight away use for drinking. Obviously, it is a big kind of advancement if it can be achieved. So we are also working with WHO. We know that the world, a lot of people are looking into water reuse, but they should have a guideline because the risk in water reuse is still there and it can be quite substantial if the thing is not operate properly. So the risk can be high. So that's the reason why we work with WHO.
예, 감사합니다. 싱가포르 사례에 대해서 발표해 주신 임몽 수석위원님께 힘찬 박수 부탁드립니다. 상황을 진행하기 전에 간단히 안내 말씀드리겠습니다. 다음은 마지막 발표 순서입니다. 서두에 말씀드린 바와 같이 키워터에서는 공급자 중심의 수돗물 공급 패러다임으로 전환하여 고객 중심의 수돗물 서비스 제공을 위하여 노력하고 있으며 파주시를 대상으로 스마트 워터 시티 시범사업을 시행하여 획기적으로 음용률을 향상시키는 성과를 거둔 바 있습니다. 소비자가 믿고 마실 수 있는 수돗물 공급을 위한 K-워터, 즉 한국의 성공 사례와 미래 물 관리를 위한 제안을 들어보도록 하겠습니다. 발표는 K-워터 김성환 처장님께서 해주시겠습니다. 임찬 박수 부탁드립니다.
네, 안녕하십니까. 김성환입니다. 소비자 중심의 물공급이라고 하는 새로운 패러다임에 대해서 사례를 중심으로 말씀드리겠습니다. 수자원공사 4,500명 직원들은 국내 유일의 물 전문 기관으로서의 책임과 소명을 다해 나가고 있습니다. 지금까지 탁도라든가 수인성 질병, 그 다음에 잔류염소 같은 것들로 인해서 표준 처리에서 보도 처리로 지금 향해 가고 있습니다. 또한 시설비 확장이라든가 그를 통해서 시설물의 안정성을 도모하고 그 다음에 ICT를 기반한 통합물 관리 이런 쪽으로 가고 있습니다. 아까 미국의 교수님도 사례를 들었지만 여러 가지 물을 직접 음용하기 위해서 여러 가지 홍보 활동들을 하고 있습니다. 런던 같은 경우는 런던 탭이라고 하는 것들, 그 다음에 호주는 브랜드를 만든 수도 브랜드, 그 다음에 프랑스는 예술적인 감각을 바탕으로 해서 디자인하고 하는 것들을 사례로 볼 수 있었습니다. 우리나라 상수도는 GDP의 성장과 함께 급수 보급률이 98.5%, 그 다음에 유수율은 84.2%, 관로 길이가 18만 5천 킬로, 그리고 우리의 산업은 약 6.4빌리언 정도 되고 있습니다. 우리나라의 처리도 현재 오존이라든가 GAC, 멤브레인 같은 고도 처리를 도입하고 있고 세계 어느 나라에 못지않는 수질 검사 그리고 좋은 품질의 수질들로 인정을 받고 있습니다. 그러나 우리는 현재 잘 알고 계시겠지만 조류의 번성으로 인한 수처리의 어려움, 그 다음에 유해물질로 인한 물 정지라든가 이런 것들이 수처리하는 문제가 여러 가지 되고 있고, 그 다음에 특광형 씨를 제외하고는 약 10%에 불과한 유수율도 있고, 노후가 되고 있어서 많은 투자가 요구되고 있습니다. 예를 들면 수자원공사 같은 경우 2030년까지 약 3조 9천억 원을 투입을 할 예정으로 있습니다. 그러나 현재 수돗 물값은 660원의 평가에 불과하지만 이것은 생산비에 못 미치는, 생산비 77.8%밖에 안 되는 이런 어려운 상황에 있습니다. 그래서 이런 것들이 악순환으로 이어서 아까 소개도 드렸지만 수돗물이 약 50% 정도의 먹는 음용률밖에 안 되고 있습니다. 그래서 사회적인 비용이 약 2조에 이른다 이렇게 되고 있고, 이런 좀 더 혁신적인 관리 기법이 필요하다 이렇게 되고 있습니다. 그래서 수자원공사에서는 이런 것들을 바탕으로 해서 뭔가 혁신적인 것들을 이루자 하는 것들을 내세우게 되었습니다. 좀 더 시설 확장을 통한 끊임없는 물 공급, 그 다음에 안정성 증대, 무엇보다 더 중요한 소비자를 중심으로 한 건강한 물 공급을 하자 하는 것들이 K-워터의 모토입니다. 건강한 물이라고 하면 오염되지 않고 깨끗하고 적절한 미네랄이 있는 것들이 잘 지속적으로 관리되는 수돗물이다 이렇게 정의를 했습니다. 현재 그 의료계와의 협업을 통해서 수돗물에는 미네랄이 충분히 있고, 그 다음에 이런 것들이 비만이라든가 여러 가지 좋은 것들로 인해서 건강에 유익할 수 있다라고 지금 보고되고 있습니다. 이러한 건강한 물 공급 실현을 위해서 K-워터에서는 스마트 워터 시티라고 하는 개념을 도입을 했습니다. 스마트 워터 시티라고 하는 것은 수도꼭지에서 지수원의 수도꼭지까지 ICT라고 하는 현재 첨단 기법을 도입을 해서 이 수용가들이 안전하게 마실 수 있는 그런 물을 공급할 수 있는 시다라고 정의했습니다. 이를 위해서는 안전한 취수원 관리, 그 다음에 건강한 수돗물 생산, 그 다음에 철저한 공급장 관리, 또 무엇보다 중요한 소비자 중심의 공급, 서비스 이런 것들을 모토로 해서 추진하고 있습니다. 이와 함께 아까 최 교수님께서도 소개했지만 무엇보다 중요한 게 홍보 같습니다. 스마트 워터 시티와 함께 홍보에 대한 것들을 저희들이 가장 중점을 뒀습니다. 의료계와의 협업, 그 다음에 주부교실과 같은 단체와의 공동 활동, 그 다음에 시민들을 위한 홍보 활동, 캠페인 등을 지속적으로 실시를 했습니다. 이러한 것들을 대한 사례를 잠깐 소개해드리겠습니다. 사례에 대한 도시는 파주시입니다. 파주시는 약 42만의 인구를 가지고 있는데요. 저희들이 1차는 2014년부터 했고 2차는 2015년 올해부터 했습니다. 1차 시범사업하는 데는 약 3만 7천 명의 인구를 가진 도시, 그 다음에 2차는 19만 5천, 그래서 약 전체 인구의 절반 정도 되는 데를 올해는 실시를 하고 있습니다. 여기에서는 저희가 하는 것들은 아까 미국 사례에서 한 것하고 거의 동일합니다. 실시간 수질 모니터링을 하고, 그 다음에 염소를 제염소를 계속 투입해가지고 시민들이 불편함 없이 먹을 수 있도록 하는 것들, 그 다음에 노후된 간이나에서 나오는 것들은 삭수를 적절하게 배출하는 것들, 그 다음에 이런 정보들, 수질에 대한 정보들을 시민들에게 실시간으로 알려주는 것들, 이런 것들로 저희들이 한 것들이 중심이 되겠습니다. 그런 것들 자세히 살펴드리면 워터넷이라고 하는 GIS를 기반으로 한 실시간 정보 관리 시스템입니다. 여기에는 수질 관리, 그 다음에 관망의 최적화, 그 다음에 수질 관리, 수량 관리, 그 다음에 리스크, 위험이 어떻게 있었는가 하는 관리들을 하고 있는 모듈이 되겠습니다. 제염소, 많은 사람들이 염소 냄새에 대해서 거부감을 가졌습니다. 그래서 미국의 사례와 같이 저희들도 중간에 제염소를 통해서 염소치가 거의 안 나면서도 건강에는 유지될 수 있도록 이런 조치를 취했습니다. 또 하나는 탁질이 좀 문제가 있을 경우에 자동으로 배치해서 이걸 배출할 수 있는 설치를 중간중간 설치해서 시민들이 탁수가 발생하지 않도록 이런 조치를 취했습니다. 또한 지속적인 정기적인 조사를 통해서 문제가 있는 데는 플러시라고 하는 청소를 했습니다. 그것은 여러 가지 공기를 이용하는 방법, 이런 걸레라고 표현하는데요. 걸레 같은 소음 같은 걸로 해서 닦아내는 방법들을 통해서 관 내가 항상 청결하게 유지되도록 이렇게 조치를 취했습니다. 또한 시민들이 이 물에 대해서 항상 안심을 갖도록 하기 위해서 전광판이라든가 어플리케이션, 스마트폰 앱을 통해서 우리 아파트, 우리 동네가 어떤 상태에 있다, 이런 것들을 알려주는 것들을 시작하고 했습니다. 또한 홍보라는 것들이 굉장히 중요하기 때문에 저희들이 워터 닥터나 워터 코온이라는 개념을 도입해서 각 가정에 방문을 해서 수질을 검사해주고, 또 수질이 문제가 있는 데는 아파트 공대배관이라든가 청소하는 서비스, 그리고 이런 것들이 됐을 때 인증을 해주는 이런 사업들을 했습니다. 또한 여러 가지 시민들과 함께하는 거버넌스를 구축해서 물을 먹을 수 있도록 홍보를 활동을 지속하고 있습니다. 이를 통해서 저희들이 얻은 결론은 당초에 시작하기 전에 1차 했던 것이 1%에 불과한 음용률이 첫 해에는 19.3%, 올해에는 24.5%로 상당히 올라왔습니다. 또한 이번에 처음 시작한 금천 지역에서는 3%에서 18.5%로 향상을 했습니다. 또한 저희들이 가장 우려하고 있는 밥을 하는데도 수돗물을 쓰지 않는 극불신청이 23%에서 4.5%로 상당히 많이 줄어들었습니다. 또한 이제 만족도 관련돼서도 52%, 59%, 84% 그리고 올해 이번에 저희들이 추구하는 스마트워터 시티라고 하는 사업의 만족도가 80에서 88%로 해서 이런 사업을 통해서 먹는 물뿐만 아니라 만족도도 충분히 올 수 있다라는 자신감을 갖게 되었습니다. 또한 기술적인 것으로 해서 탁도가 잔류 염소가 최대 39% 이렇게 많이 줄어들어서 시민들이 실질적으로 안심하고 먹을 수 있는 과학적인 것들도 이루었다 하는 것들을 말씀드릴 수 있습니다. 저희들이 이런 것들을 통해서 여러 가지 홍보를 했습니다. 최근에 올 5월에 있었던 스마트 월드 포럼에 많은 호응을 받았었고 이를 통해서 서울시에서도 이제 지금 하겠다고 지금 같이 하겠다는 것도 있고요. 그 다음에 정부에서도 향후에 1년 한 해에 2-3개 정도는 계속 추진하겠다 이런 발표가 있었습니다. 저희들이 이제 이런 것들을 통해서 제안드리고 싶은 것은 우선 수돗물 공급에 있어서 취수원부터 수도꼭지까지 ICT라고 하는 최첨단의 기법들을 도입할 필요가 있다. 그래서 그런 것들을 통해서 체계적인 관리가 필요하다. 이렇게 말씀드릴 수 있고 이런 정보들이 모바일 앱이라든가 토탈 케어 서비스들 이런 것들이 소비자 중심으로 이루어져서 시민들이 안심하고 확인하면서 먹을 수 있는 전략을 가야겠다 하는 것들을 제안드리고 있습니다. 또한 수도 공급자, 그 다음에 정부, 그 다음에 NGO 모든 사람들이 같이 어떤 수돗물이라고 하는 공통적인 것을 가지고 논의할 수 있는 자리가 꼭 필요하다 하는 말씀을 드리고 또 하나 중요한 것들은 아까 사례에서 보셨겠지만은 다른 나라는 상당히 수돗물 물값의 인상들을 굉장히 유연하게 하고 있는데 저희들은 아직 그러지 못한 것 같습니다. 그래서 수도 물값이라든가 어떤 서비스 같은 것들이 사회적인 합의가 필요하다 이렇게 말씀드릴 수 있겠습니다. 제가 오늘 오전에 파주에 가서 성과 발표를 하고 왔습니다. 굉장히 많은 주부님들이 오셨는데요. 이 행복센터라고 하는 건물에서 했습니다. 거기 안에다가 저희들이 음수대를 설치했는데 음수대를 정말로 거리낌 없이 그냥 와서 마시는 것을 보고 저희들이 상당히 많이 이제 진척을 하고 있구나. 지금 여기 이제 주부교실에서도 많이 오시고 그랬는데요. 여러분들이 좀 많이 협력해 주신다면은 수돗물이 유명률이 높아지고 더 불신해서 신뢰하는 시대로 가지 않을까 하는 생각을 가지고 있습니다. 네, 감사합니다.
스마트 워터시티에 대한 내용 굉장히 짧으면서도 쉽게 설명해 주셔서 굉장히 잘 들었습니다. 저는 수자원공사 수도권 지역본부에 근무하는 김태훈이라고 하는데요. SWC 사업을 하면서 많은 주민 만족도에 대한 조사가 이루어진 걸로 알고 있습니다. 그래서 지금 혹시 수돗물의 수질이라든지 이런 서비스들이 이런 획기적으로 개선이 되었을 때 주민들이 수도 요금이 인상되는 것을 수용할 의사가 있는지 거기에는 그런 거에 대한 조사가 이루어졌는지 궁금하고요. 그리고 주민들의 수질 개선이라든지 이런 서비스 향상이 되었을 때 실제 체감하고 있는 만족도가 어느 정도 되는 것이었는지 그런 조사 내용가 있으면 설명해 주셨으면 좋겠습니다.
저희들이 이제 지불의사에 대한 조사를 했습니다. 지금 잘 아시겠지만 아까 제가 잠깐 소개드렸지만 평균 요금이 한 660원 정도 된다고 했는데요. 한 10%만 올려도 충분히 된다고 저희들은 생각하고 있는데 시민들은 그거에 대한 것들을 수질만 좋아지고 깨끗하다면 지불할 의사가 있다 이렇게 답을 하고 있습니다. 그래서 이 사업을 통해서 저희들이 적극적으로 나간다면 수돗물 값에 대해서는 크게 부담 없이 할 수 있지 않을까, 주민들이 동의하지 않을까 하는 생각을 가지고 있습니다.
스마트워터 시티 성공 사례를 발표해 주신 김성환 총장님께 힘찬 박수.